All right, cool.
All
Well,
right.
I'm joined here today with Moxie, who's in South California, just outside of LA.
Hi.
And we just kind of met serendipitously on the internet, as you do, and had some cool exchanges about sort of creativity. And she was supportive in kind of what she saw me promoting. And we decided to just jump on a call together. So yeah, you'll be getting to know Moxie more or less at the same time as me.
Yep.
And yeah, so welcome to the show, Moxie.
Thank you, Nick. So tell me about like what made you do this? This is like it was kind of weird that you reached out like that. So I thought, I mean, I get guys, and women like all the time reaching out, but your approach was different. So I was like, this is interesting.
Hmm.
What does he talk about? Like actually someone who wants to just talk. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, so I guess one of the main ideas, and this is still at the idea phase, so we'll see what's going to unfold, but I wanted to have conversations and explore creativity and the creative impulse and how the title is Pioneering Enchantment. And so like how the idea of how enchantment shows up in people's lives and how it's linked with their creative spirit or the source of the idea of going into the unknown and exploring something new and just feeling more alive, like chasing aliveness, these sort of concepts. And so often the model of podcasts is kind of the interviewer and the expert,
Yeah.
which is, there's a ton to be learned in that sort of way. And I've really enjoyed a lot of podcasts like that. But it's
Mhm.
also, I don't know. I feel like as far as creativity goes, it almost raises the bar. So one of the things that I explore is kind of unrealistic expectations. And I think
Yeah.
when we live in this media saturated world of experts, we kind of feel like we have to become something that we're not just to show
Yeah.
up on a show or something like that. So, and I was kind of curious. I know very little about you, so we'll I'm sure there's lots of stuff you may be an expert in some sense of the word. um, but I just like the idea of having conversations with people and finding out how these elements kind of contribute and show themselves in their daily life. So that was kind of why I reached out, and I reached out specifically to you.
Mhm.
Um, One, you'd added me, and that was kind of, that was an invitation of interest. It was like, oh, okay, there's already some sort of resonance here,
Yeah.
and I really I liked how on your profile you're just very playful. So I think playfulness and creativity is, they go hand in hand. So I was just curious to just see where the conversation would take us,
I always
rather
tell my
than
playfulness is intelligence, like is playfulness, like that's how you learn is by playing. So because there's right now they're doing that Zoom stuff. Yeah, they're very trying to stick to schedules, and I'm like, no, let's go play. Like we learn so much more through playing, and that's I feel like so much more creativity flows that way when you're not trying. So yeah, I love what you're doing, and that's kind of what drew me to your page in the first place. Well, first I think it was the dog. Like
Mhm.
it was actually very soothing to watch. And yeah, like I think that kind of like I was in a that vibrated with me. Like that was nice to see someone like connect with, I see all these cute animal videos and I love watching those too. But it was just a nice quiet bond that I saw with you and your dog. And it was yeah. And everything else kind of resonated. So
Oh,
I
cool.
liked what and especially the enchantment. I'm going to tell you, like when I read what you wrote, like that was the first thing that I saw, like magic, enchantment, anything kind of like not grounded in reality, like of what everyone sees. Like I love that shit. Hey,
Yeah,
buddy.
cool. All right, so there's loads of threads there. So
Mhm.
when, as far as playfulness goes, how what's kind of an early memory of realizing that you didn't want to kind of do things in maybe like an orderly, linearly fashion? And I'm just kind of guessing, but that's kind of how you came across in that. You were like,
I think and I had like I guess people would say like I had a rough childhood, and that kind of environment kind of makes you like you look for like you sink or swim. So I was lucky to have like my mom and my older brothers were very creative, like very playful too. So they would always try to make a game out of everything. And I think that's got to be it, you know, like everything. Um, Even when things look down, like it was always like, okay, how can we make this fun, or how can we relate this to, you know, how can we make this like relate this to a hero or a comic book or something that we've seen. And I found that like that's kind of like where I get my buoyancy from. Like if you can make a game out of anything, then you know you can enjoy it. Like life hands you so many, you know, things. Like I mean, we all have a choice in how we approach it. Like um, let's see. Oh, I was showing my daughters. We went for a walk. Dorcas. This is Dorcas, by the way. Um,
It's
we went
cool.
for a walk on a trail near here, and there is a bunch of little hills that the kids had made so that they could ride their bicycles, right? And there was some men, and they were working on a ditch, like on the opposite side, and they looked just beat and they looked exhausted. And I was showing my daughters, I was like, those little boys are doing the same thing, the exact same thing, like in reverse, but they're having fun. I'm like, they're having fun through the whole process. And like how much, you know, like it's going faster for them. You know, other kids started joining in. I was like, it's all about that. Like they could look at their at life or the situation in front of them as a task, or they could find some fun in it. And that's kind of like my motto. I think I even have like a thing over there that says, if it's not fun, it won't get done.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Definitely in some of the coaching that I do, it's like a key question of like, how can you make this fun?
Yeah.
And I know the story of that comes to mind for me when I was younger was something that my mum would say, you know, life's not all about having fun, Nick. You know, and I can appreciate where that's coming from, although I don't have kids yet. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure things get overwhelming, and a kid who's just trying to, you know, exploit as much fun as it possible from
Mhm.
any situation. But it's one of those things that I wrote down for myself where I was like, life can just be about having fun. As insofar as like, let's explore that to its limit before we look in other directions, because there's so much that we want to get out of life that is related to enjoyment and fun,
Mhm.
especially when it's work. And there's that saying that, what is it like? I'm going to completely butcher it now, but that idea of evolved work is going to not look too different from play, something like
Oh
that.
yeah. Yeah. That if you love, is it like what? Yeah, something like that. Like if you love what you do, then you won't work a day in your life, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's these sort
Really
of
the same
themes.
thing, but yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you got a story? I love the way you describe that with your brothers and stuff growing up. Is there any actual memory that comes to mind of when a game or a superhero kind of became a
Oh,
part of what you were up to?
see. Let's see a game. I wouldn't say superheroes, but part of like with fear, right? I used to use things that scared me, like in movies. Like my brothers would play a game with me. Like whenever I would have like a nightmare or anything like that, or if I was afraid of something, I would say a story about what it was, and then they would take it and change the story, and then we would pass it on. And um, they used to incorporate like people that like I was afraid of. And sometimes they would take them, like bringing them in would allow me to change them like how I saw them. And that was kind of like, you know, one of the things that we would do. So it was a game that we would play like if we were scared, it was a game that we would play just like in general. Like it was just a fun thing to do. We would bring in we watched a lot of like horror films. This was like back in the 80s, early 90s and stuff. So we watched like a lot of that like adventure stuff like Goonies. So we would we used to bring in the Goonies all the time. So that was a big part of it. And we always would pick like the underdog characters, the because they always seem to have the most shift from, you know, the most improvement. And that was
Mhm.
kind of like what we would identify with. Like they would, and those were the people who had the most fun along the way. They made all the mistakes that everyone else would look at that we could identify with. like they weren't perfect, and it was cool to see that. So yeah, we used to play Goonies a lot. We used to do raids like in the neighborhood and pretend we were like pirates or whatever, whatever was on TV, whatever was popular at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
we were very active, like very active. Like my mom had probably 3 kids who would probably be classified as like ADHD. So she was a single parent. So she actually, I think that's how she got us all reined in, was that she was a playful parent. So she would play with us. Like my mom would even
Yeah.
fight with when we were like teenagers. Like she would take us all on. So I still play with my kids like that. Like I'll throw them around.
Yeah, I think there's so much to that of like harvesting, sort of harnessing that energy through play and redirection, especially if you've, one of the things or traits that creative people often have is that rebelliousness. And so if you take that sort of the stick approach, then it just gives something to push back against a lot more. So I think, yeah, being able to find a way to make it a game. I also really like what you say about being able to invite certain characters into, the story or dealing with fear and then change it. I think that's also something that has been interesting. Like, we don't do it that much, but in some of the creativity work I do, there's this idea of different muses, and you can look at it in that way, or you could make it sort of a more sort of plain psychological model and just different ways of thinking about something. But there's
Mhm.
something about personifying certain attributes and then being able to like flexibly relate to them
Yeah.
that, again, I think there's kind of games for the mind to play, especially if I'm just learning about ADHD at the moment, and I have a
Mhm.
suspicion that I might have it as well. And
Yeah.
one of the things I think that's appealing about all of this is that in making things games, there's this kind of extra dopamine to be explored. Like, it makes something more exciting that would otherwise be kind of mundane and dull and not hold your attention. So stuff that I've
Mhm.
even experimented with on those 2 points is like the idea of, being rebellious and saying like, I'm not going to do this, and then doing it anyway. I'm definitely not going to write this essay, and then I'm
Yeah.
only going to write the first word or something like that, and just giving yourself permission to explore like playful ways of doing something. I know that kind of the things that I was attracted to before was more like, okay, I've got to be disciplined, I've got to be a man of my word, I've got to do all of those things, which they have great they're great characteristics and they all have their place. But I think, again, about this theme of playfulness, like even the things that you
Sure.
hold as like, yeah, these values define me, like being able to be playful and flexible with all of those and explore different ways and say like, I'm definitely not going to do that, and then do it. you know just sort of taking yourself lightly enough to explore and play with how things actually work and what works for you, I think is a great way to, yeah, just feel like life is fresh and you can approach each day sort of with
Funny
something
you
new to
said that
learn.
about the never, like I'm not going to do that. My daughter does that with herself. Like I was asking them because I'm not, I don't like I don't put like that type of pressure on them. Like when it comes to like their homework and stuff, like I don't like homework. Like I'm like against homework. Like so but I always ask them like what motivates you? Like what because I know because I can't be there to motivate you throughout your whole life. So what do you do for yourself? And my daughter does that like naturally. She does that whole like I'm not going to do this. Like and then just because she likes to rebel against herself, because she's like, I can't rebel against you. There's nothing to rebel against. So she rebels against that part. And I noticed that I do something similar. Like I imagine like my ego, like as a person, like, and I just, um, I have like sympathy for them or like they're a comedic character. Like maybe they're like, I don't ever watch, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Like if, like I think
Not
of
really,
my
no.
well, it's like this very paranoid character on there. And I often think of my ego as that person. And I would just like calm that person down. Like, no, yeah, this is, you're just acting nuts about this like, sort of thing. So yeah, like I find I pretty much yeah, just apply that like imagination pretty much to everything, like consciously. I
Hmm.
look at the environment and play with it. I guess I'm constantly playing pretend or recreating what's in front of me. Like even with this situation right now, like right, like you could be in space, right? You are in space.
Yeah, I am in space.
Other world.
I feel like I'm in space half the time.
Mhm.
What as far as like concrete, if we could call it that, like anything that you do creatively that has been a constant thread throughout your life, whether that's like writing or painting or you know.
Yeah, writing.
Hmm.
Since I was a kid, like since very little. Like I remember the first time I held a pen in my hand. Like I remember that, and I remember the excitement of my siblings. Like I had my twin brothers there, and my big brothers. Like I remember how excited they were to see me write, and I realized, whoa, that's like a lot of power. Like,
Oh,
and
cool.
I write constantly. I have paper everywhere. I write a lot of I am statements. Uh, I write a lot of what I want to see. Like I rewrote like how I saw my entire life. Like it totally helped me, and that's like, fiction plays a huge part. Like I don't. I know a lot of people like it's encouraged to read, like facts, but I don't like facts are so relative. So I've always written anything that I write about myself like as an I am statement, kind of like I want this to happen. Like I would write it
Like
out
an
kind of
affirmation sort of style.
yeah, like affirmations, but like telling a story. Like as a kid, I used to do that too. I think I remembered like this when I grew up, we had my mom was working, so we kind of like were like latchkey kids. So I used to say that the TV was my babysitter, like Mr. Rogers, right? And one of the things we used to watch was the Twilight Zone. And I remember this episode of the Twilight Zone where there was a guy and he would write and he wrote like his wife like into existence. He could change anything that was happening just by writing it, typing it out. And that made such a huge impression on me, especially because I'd seen like I was an avid reader as a kid. So and then seeing how how communicating like when you're young is an advantage, like having to have that ability to speak to adults in a way that they understand, like it gets their attention
Hmm.
more. Like it was rough, so I learned in a way so that I could it was like survival, but I had to have fun with it too, because why else would I want to keep going if life wasn't fun, right? So I would write out pretty much anything I saw that like that looks like that would be fun. Like even if it doesn't work, that's still fun to do, right? I mean, it's fun to sit there and imagine. And I think that's been like the writing part has carried me through. Like I have not I don't think there's been a day that's gone by, Nick, that I have not sat down and written with my hand. Like it has to be with my hand.
Right.
Like there's that connection, And it does. Like I notice like if I wrote like if you look back at journals, like if I wrote parts, like I wrote out parts of my life to be dark. And
Hmm.
then I keep parts where I decided, nah, I'm sick of that story. And literally where I've written that, like, nah, I'm sick of that story. Let's move on to a new one. And so, like, yeah, that's been the common theme. Like, I think I'm realizing now um, that writing, like, aside from it having a creative outlet and also helping you with like your mental health, is it's really like I think it's like part of being human, like part of the human experience. We try to communicate or leave some sort of mark or communicate with ourselves. Like to me, writing's a mirror, and I don't always see what I need to see if I'm just using my eyes. Like it's like this is like an extension of like something telling me
Hmm.
back. I don't always hear. So that's like, but right, I love it. I can love writing.
Yeah.
I love the access that it gives to something else to communicate to me and to
Yeah.
allow me to create.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think I love as well the story that you could see this look on their eyes when you first picked up a pen, and it's kind of symbolized the power that writing holds. And yeah, I think that's so. I love that you're able to explore. I think any sort of reflection, kind of, any way of putting yourself out there gives you enough time. Like, you're in the process of reflecting about your life, and it kind of gives you time to question which way you want to take something,
Mhm.
or become familiar with the fact that, oh, I'm really writing this same kind of story, or I'm journaling this same stuff all the time. Do I want to
Aware.
change that? Yeah, it helps with awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially because if I allow my hand to write without consciously thinking, like I don't allow the pressure of expecting myself to write, but I kind of just let it, I will get answers that like I hadn't thought of.
Mm,
Kind of just doodle. If you sit there and doodle something, it's kind of the same way. Um, I feel like that's actually been a way for me to consistently access parts of myself that maybe that I don't like, my subconscious. Like for me, that's been the easiest way. Like I do meditate and I enjoy it, but I find that with meditation, I get, some people kind of get like drunk off of it. Like it's just too, like I could stay and meditate like all day. Like I could just be in that state. But I mean, I also don't want, I compare it to like the lotus eaters in like the Odyssey. Like it's a
okay.
nice state to be in, but eventually you gotta, you need the contrast and like the uncomfortableness of life to live it and play with it. So that's why like I prefer this because I'm still kind of in it, like I'm in
Hmm.
my creation and I'm also like seeing all angles. I'm not floating off into space again.
Yeah, I think that's something that's so important for to like honor in the creative process. And I think
Mhm.
that it's easy, or I've found this in myself, like there's parts of me that have wanted to go towards meditation or go towards kind of stilling myself in a hope that it's going to help me harness the chaos, because the chaos is, like, frankly, quite scary. It's quite scary to enter the process, to have an idea and to want to turn it into something, and at the
Mhm.
same time feel completely ill-equipped, incompetent, like probably not going to do it. There's quite a lot of fear in that. And I think that in myself, and I'm sure I've seen this in other people, that there's this idea of like, oh, well, if I just meditate, if I become semi-enlightened, if I like get my diet right, like all of these problems are going to go away, and I'm just going to be able to embrace my creativity in this orderly, linear manner and kind of go through it without,
Yeah.
what I mean? There's something about, it's
Like
somewhere
there's
to hide.
an end. Like, yeah, like you have something to achieve, but it's like it's a continuous thing. Like this, I think it's that's cool that like um that you're putting this emphasis on play, like and not feeling that like burden to like
Hmm.
do, like I said like with the meditation, I think there's a lot of people like it's promoted and yeah, it's good for you, but like not everybody meditates the same way. Like um I tell my daughter, she said she has a hard time. I said, but you do meditate. She said she can't. And I was like, you do. You sit there and you play your guitar and you meditate because you're just in another place. Like it's flowing through you. I see it. Like I can tell. And even the animals come. Like the cat, without fail, if you're meditating, she is there. She's like right there, just buzzing by you. But I just told her, I was like, I think it's kind of like the expectation of, you think meditation is sitting there, but just like people think hypnosis means that you're going like back and forth with, you're getting programmed or something like that. Like
Yeah,
we
yeah.
all have these weird ideas. So that's I like the idea of playing with and changing everything that's in front of me because I can, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be what anybody else says. Like this pen could be like a poodle. Like it's whatever I want to call it, right? I mean, we create our own life. Like, yeah, everyone else is gonna say it's Michelle, it's a pen, but to me,
Was there ever a time when you sort of rejected your creativity, or felt like it was a hindrance on your life and like you tried to suppress it?
yes, yes. Actually, that's kind of like recently. Like I came out of like, I would every single time I would try to create something, like a cute little doll, it would come out with like one eye. Like I'd make it into a cyclops. Like I wouldn't even I'd get into such a
What
groove
kind of medium are you working with, like, when you say
with
this?
clay. Like I would
Okay.
work with clay. Yeah. Or I mean, I anything that I would do because I work with clay. I'll paint. I use paper mache. Like I sculpt in many different mediums. But yeah, in general, whenever I would start something, I'd have this idea that it was going to be this cute thing, and then I would just get into a flow of where I stopped completely what my expectation was. And it would end up being something like that, like, like a little cyclops baby. It was very cute, but it wasn't what I was going for. Every single one, Nick, like everyone, like horns, but I found them cute. But I also knew that like other people, like no other people would tell me like that's inappropriate. And so I actually tried to shift. I realized I had been trying to embrace other people's idea of what, like it doesn't really matter. Like I had thought I was caring about what other people thought about what I was doing instead of realizing that I actually made that in that flow. And that's part of my strength. That's part of like I can take something, it's kind of like my theme for my life. Like I can take something that's like, dark and I can make it cute and fun as opposed to just leaving something as it is. Like, I think that that was part of my lesson. But yeah, it was a
So it
lot
was like
of
accepting,
yeah, trying.
what was actually coming up rather than trying to sort of turn it into something else.
Yeah, like I said, I had stopped creating because I was trying to create something positive what would appeal to other people. And it occurred to me like, oh well, that's just that who knows, that will never work. Like it will, that's
Mhm.
why it worked for me before, because I could never appeal like to anyone. And I was not comfortable with that either because I wasn't allowing myself to create. And yeah, once I started to like, okay, got back into the groove of like, yeah, this is part of like, this is my gift. Like I can take things that are creepy and make them cute. Like I can take a shitty situation and I can make it fucking fun, like
Mhm.
that's that's part of like I like taking chaos and embracing it now. Like as before, it was like I that was my resistance, was trying to box it in. And now people will tell me, you like chaos. I'm like, yes, I do. I do. I love chaos. It's change. It causes creativity. Adversity makes everyone stronger. It makes you smarter. Like it does. It makes you adapt faster. Like it's. I have the proof. My little girl,
Mhm.
they were 2 pounds and 4 pounds when they were born. They were born almost 3 months early, and the one who was 2 pounds, she was ready to go home in a week. The other one, she was a little bit bigger. She had more stress on her heart, and the nurse, she had told me, she's like, I'm like, don't let this little, like, she's barely 2 pounds. Like, don't let her go home with me. Like, I'll lose her. Like, she's lost in the house. Like, and she's, are you sure? She's so tiny and she's so weak. And she's like, no, she's really strong. She's like, because of all the adversity she faced while you were pregnant with her, it made her super strong. She just doesn't look it. She just looks, and that's kind of like, that's how I approach my creativity now. Like, plus I've had so much, I've been attracting people like with my writing who are creative without, um, without any bounds, without need for validation from anyone else.
Mhm.
They're openly creative and they get their validation from within. And I'm meeting people who are also in the same spot with me where they're at that level where they're starting to put themselves out there and they're feeling vulnerable. So it's cool. Like I'm aligning with all of these people, and it has a lot to do with opening myself up to making no pressure, like embracing mistakes and being going with the chaos and yeah, embracing it. That's how
Yeah.
you're
So much,
that's how
so much
you're
good
here.
stuff there. So much good stuff. Are you able to get a sense of what was going through your mind when you were trying to conform to something other than what you were kind of naturally producing? What kind of messages or narratives were like trying to push you in in a direction other than the one you would kind of naturally show up for?
Yeah, I think during that time I was still working through. like abandonment issues, right? So I was trying to keep people in my life who who I thought, that's how I thought how life had to be. Like a traditional family is a certain way, right? And I had kind of shut off that part of myself to adapt to like mainstream society to be that person. And then I realized like once I went through and started working through like why is this so like why do I have such a like if this is right for me and if because of society says this, then why am I so avert? Why am I so having such an
Hmm.
aversion to it? And I had to look back and really, like I said, like I at that time I was just very eager to try to be part of like mainstream society, like because of expectations and because of my own thoughts of like what I should be like in order to counter like I just didn't have like the great I was so focused on the outside that I wasn't actually looking inwardly. And now like I said, I'm at the point where I don't care. Like that was the point that I reached where I just was like, I don't care. I don't care what anybody thinks. Like I I'm gonna make whatever I make and somebody will like it, somebody won't. If nobody does, I got it out of me. Like I made it. I
Yeah,
made a
yeah.
mistake or I made a jumping off point, but it's there. I actually say now, like I like to say that I'm God. And my favorite thing is to quote the Bible and like, God made the world and he's like, I am good. And it was good. So it doesn't matter what I do, it is good. Like it may look
Yeah,
like a
yeah, I
mess,
love
but
that.
it's good. It's good. Now let's move on. I don't dwell. Like I'm just looking at the positive now. Like, yeah,
Yeah, brilliant. I love
yeah.
that. There's a kind of phrase, it's good enough. But,
Mhm.
even to drop the enough, because the enough puts it on a kind of spectrum of like,
Yeah.
oh, well, there's such a thing as not enough. And I think there's so much to be said for like just being in motion and
Hmm.
like, being in the process and what happens, it's good because it's part of what's the result. And there's a big difference between making something for the performance and the practice. So there are some times when it's like, okay, I want something to reach a certain standard, but I think
Hmm.
so often we suffocate our creative process because we're trying to produce the final product without
Yeah.
before even getting in motion.
Yeah. We do kind of like jump ahead of ourselves. But yeah, that whole perfection thing or trying to be like perfect, like, or get something right. Like, I've been actually realizing like you'll never get anything right or perfect ever, and there's no end. So there's no like you said about the whole enough. Like we put so many limits in our speech and it gets sunk in our head. So that's part of like me consciously being aware of like what I say. Like I won't say enough. Like I know like it'll irritate people when I say like I'm God, but I also know like that's good for them. Like it's good for them to be irritated. Like they can this opportunity for them to use their imaginations like I am and take something that makes them uncomfortable and play with it a little bit. So, is there anything like you're asking me like is there anything that did that to you make you feel like you were trying to appease other people and didn't let your creativity flow?
Yeah, yeah, big time. I think a massive period.
Oh,
It's a good howl from a small dog.
I know, right? Okay, there.
Yeah, I really think most of my life I was quite self-embracing about just the way I approached everything. And, I felt like my adaptability was great. My lack of attention was great. Like all of these things it led to infatuations and brief
Yeah.
romances with different types of games. Or, I loved basketball, I love yo-yoing, and this sort of attention where I would just get super into something at the expense of lots of other things, but it would enrich my life in so many ways. And I thought that was great for a while, for most of my life until about 25, 26, 27. And then I started to realize, oh, wow, there's a whole society that we're supposed to live in. And I started to kind of pursue messages that were enforcing that point. I was kind of interested in the Jordan Peterson message, or these kind of things, because I was looking around at my life and like, oh fuck, I'm kind of like really chaotic. Maybe this is maybe I'm lacking something here. And so a
Mhm.
number of years were quite challenging, I think, where I started to feel quite deficient in so many ways, and that I
Mhm.
didn't fit, and I had to find a way of making myself fit. And I one of the things I wrote, I started writing in November, a kind of story of how I arrived on this island, and after traveling quite a bit, and I wanted to, build my house and just explore my creativity, rap, and do all of these different things. But I
Yeah.
needed to find a way of making some income, and I figured, okay, I'll work online and I'll be a coder. And on
Mhm.
one hand, there's this really mainstream thing where I'm like really pulled towards being accepted by the mainstream in some way. So it's like, oh, I'll be a coder. I might be living in a real remote, isolated place, having done a whole host of kind of wacky things with my early 20s. But now I've come through the other side, and the world can embrace me as a legitimate member of society, sort of thing. And and it really like squashed me. It really squashed my creative spirit. And I'd been squashing it myself. It wasn't any of the choices that I was making. It wasn't the
Yeah.
coding or anything. It was just exactly as you said, that there wasn't the self-acceptance that I could show up as I am, and explore ways of letting, explore ways of that finding a job. It was like that had to be some sort of side hobby, if you like. That who I really was a side hobby, and I had to become someone else to actually be my main gig.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it was really this creativity work that
Mhm.
liberated me from that in so many ways. Like I met this woman, Jill Badonsky, who's mentored me in how
Mhm.
she sees creativity, and all of the stuff that we're talking about that's coming up naturally, and giving permission. I think giving creative people permission as early as possible to really embrace that, and it not necessarily need to have a place in the market, or you don't have to sell something, or you don't, like, this is really important. There's so much.
Have to have like society's idea of what it doesn't have to be purposeful, because that also held me back too, thinking that what I made had to have a purpose instead of like just make it for making its sake. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Speak a bit more about that, because I love the word you brought up earlier as well, like buoyancy. And
Yeah.
yeah, so this,
That was
how
part
does
of
it?
it, like getting stuck, like thinking like, okay, if I'm gonna use my time on anything, then it's got to be like on something that that's going to produce like some sort of result. Like I can't just throw my time away. My time is valuable. And then it occurred to me like, no, but I was totally throwing my time away trying to do things that were productive that I hated. That I mean, and it was just that was a waste of my time. Like I'll never get that time back. Like I could have been happy in that moment. It occurred to me, I was like, I looked around and I had like a huge mess. I was trying to produce a bunch of stuff to sell. And I realized I had fun making it when it was a gift, when it was a fun little thing that I just wanted to do for someone. But when it became something that I was going to sell and monetize, and it just was not like, it wasn't fun anymore. And I realized like, whoa, like this is just not, this, this is not like this is the true waste of time. Like no amount of money that anybody could give me would make me happy than if I had just decided to do my own thing, instead of trying to do something that had purpose. I mean, I put down so many different projects that I'm excited, like, I'm excited to do now. Like I'm excited to be in the middle of, to have my hands back on. And I look at all the stuff that I tried to be like, to produce, to be productive, like society could look at me and think, oh, that person is over their stressed out of their mind and they're making stuff. So like, they're responsible. Like, I think that's what I realized. Like, um, I had to break my idea that being productive meant you had to be stressed out, or you had to be like that, like a certain thing. Like I just decided to like, no, I'm gonna have fun with this. Like it being productive is not productive. to my personal and mental health. Being productive out there is not the same as being productive in here. And yeah, so it's like once I started getting back, like I went yesterday and I bought like a bunch of paints. Like I would never, like before, I would not buy, like for like 3 years before, I would not buy anything that I hadn't thought, okay, I'm going to use it for this, this, and this, because I don't want to look like I'm doing this, or whatever else, like, or I don't want to waste this.
What
But
do
I
you mean
waste,
about that? Like, I don't want to,
like,
yeah, just say that bit again.
oh, that I didn't want to waste like my resources. Like I didn't want to waste my time. Like I was looking at I was focusing on so much lack when it came to my creativity. Like I was trying to force it. It's so funny when you think about it. Like I was trying to force my creativity like in a box so it would produce things for me. And then I wondered why it wouldn't work. Like why I
Mhm.
was, because it actually it went into so many different aspects of my life, not allowing my creativity to flow because I was trying to make it productive. I was trying to make it, yeah, like it 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 messes with your mental health, like to not make stuff just to make it, not to not make stuff just to even if it looks ugly to someone else, like who cares? You know what I mean? Like I saw this, like I saw this dog just rolling in mud and he looks so happy. Like that, you know what I mean? Like he didn't care. And I thought like that looks like so much fun. Like that's a for him, he just created a massive mess for someone. Like it we
Yeah.
it is beautiful. Like it was beautiful even in like the mess of it. Like I started to realize like, whoa, like you don't have to be productive in your creativity. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to, to make you happy, to doesn't to lift up people. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So much good stuff there. I think I wanted to touch on the bit where you said about wasting time and resources. That's
Mhm.
another thing that's so much tied into with perfectionism and, having all of these nice art supplies or a nice journal or a nice pen and feeling like, okay, I'll use this journal when I'm ready to take this seriously because I don't just want to deface this beautiful, this beautiful piece of
Yeah.
beautiful book or whatever. And also, yeah, in so many ways, we're in this cult of efficiency and productivity that, like, I've noticed it in myself. Where, on one hand, there is part of my brain that loves to analyze and critique and kind of find the logic and really appreciate systems that work well from like A to B. There's a kind of linear thing that I'm like, oh wow, that's really cool. That's really like, there's no waste there,
Mhm.
and like great writing. Like I'm not too wordy, so I really appreciate. I think coming from a kind of hip hop or rap background, like I appreciate like finding the right amount of syllables to express what you want. There's
Yeah.
something about being efficient in certain contexts where it's beautiful. There's beauty there. Um, but there's also something that's really limiting to. I can be I'm here on my house, and like my vision when I was in Ecuador and Colombia was just to buy a piece of land and just throw together a shack. Like that was my dream. I want to just kind of build a cabin with what's around, and I don't
Yeah.
want any planning permission or I don't want anything like that. And as time went on, and I ended up here in the Canary Islands, and there are planning laws, and I'm
Mhm.
somewhat kind of weaving my way between them. But I'm also aware that when I was 25, now I'm 34, I'm like, oh, maybe I should build something that has value to other people. And so there's these other expectations that are being placed on it. And as far as efficiency goes, there's so many things that I could do with energy that I currently have that I don't do because there's a feeling that it's not the final version and there's no point making a prototype version because then I'm going to waste materials, I'm going to waste time. And a lot
Mhm.
of these things come from working in industry. Like I worked as a carpenter and I've worked on festivals and events. And there's a big thing that is like, if you're working in certain environments in industry, it makes sense to try and do things in the most efficient way. If you're
Yeah.
going to do something 1,000 times over your career and you work out the best way to do it so that you're not like doing double the work, because sometimes it is that. But it's very different when you're in your creativity and you're doing something as a passion project and you're limiting yourself to not make mistakes, when it's like that is why you take on a passion project, to liberate yourself from everything
Yeah.
else the industry wants to enforce on you, that you can actually explore the beauty and freedom of making mistakes and the sorts of things that come about through them. There's so much stuff you can discover that you can never think your way through, but when you start actually creating and breaking and doing all sorts of things, you see possibility.
Yeah. I think too is like we also like you said industry, but it's also like what we look at all the time. Everyone's always trying to present like a polished, finished product, like in perfection. And we need to be a little bit more comfortable. Like, think of all the people, like if you see them, like, you see them on social media and then you see them in person and you're like, oh, like that's who you really are. Like, I'm going to meet you eventually. You know what I mean? Like, we're all going to see each other. We're not perfect. And we wonder why we have this idea that we need to be. And I think it's because we lose touch. Like we've all kind of started to see things through like a filter. And that kind of makes us think that we have to, like, we're not really interacting with each other in real time. And I think that's kind of what throws us off. It gives us this sense of that we need to be perfect because there's some delay, or
Hmm.
we always want our best self. But I think I don't know, I feel like I'm done with that. Like, who cares, like my best self is who woke up this morning. Like, it may not be anyone else's opinion of my best, but like if I'm okay with it and I'm happy with it, like that's what really matters. Like, I think that's what I've come to in my, like, creating things. Like, I enjoy this thing that I made. Like, I'm having fun with it. I actually started dating this guy and he's a painter, and seeing him like really just like go through this process of putting himself out there and making and looking at his art and accepting it, like, and that's, it's really cool because I'm realizing, like, whoa, everyone, no matter how talented, no matter how good their final product is, they're still like going through all the same human emotions and senses of, like, wait, the self-doubt. Like, we all go through that. It's no one is ever perfect, even the most positive people. Like, the thing is that we're just constantly changing what we tell ourselves. Like, yeah, it's okay, this isn't a mistake. Like I said, I
Hmm.
call things something different. This isn't a mistake, this is like, what, an opportunity. Or like, oh, what the painter used to say, happy little accident. It's just a happy little accident, or it's a jumping off point. We can call it whatever we want. Like, now there's no mistakes, right? There's just, this is just part of
Yeah.
never ending lesson of life. So let's just roll in it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I
I
think
love
about it.
that you're what drew you to the house that you're building? Like, how are you incorporating your creativity in that? Like, I know you said you didn't want any rules, because I kind of feel the same way. Like, I've always wanted to build like an earth ship, like with
Mm.
hemp. But I mean, live in California, so we have earthquakes and we have all these regulations. And I've often wanted to like go someplace, build, just build like people used to back in the day. Like,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
is, like, how's your creativity
Yeah.
in what?
I'll say something briefly on that as well, as far as like restrictions goes, because
Mhm.
on one hand, there was this idea of like, wow, the internet, you can learn to do anything. I didn't go to university, and I always had this slight chip on my shoulder, or this sense of, okay, I'm going to go off, build my cabin, and I can just like, I just want to have 3 years so I can study and learn about anything that I want to. And or I can build anything, I can learn about it on the internet.
Yeah.
And actually, the lived experience has been kind of different, in the way that, again, it was this expectation. If you type into Google how to blah blah blah, you've got all of these, again, like, experts telling you the best way to do something. And
Mhm.
I found that, and not only that there's the best way, but a lot of them are based in the States or whatever, and so they're saying, oh yeah, go and buy this, and maybe it's for a type of raised bed, or whatever it is. There's all these things, and maybe you need to go to the shop and get something, and there's just not the range of stuff here.
Yeah.
On this small little island I'm on, there isn't that sort of broad range of commercial opportunities to like get what you want. So straight away, I'm starting from this place of lack. And I realized, like, God, this is totally the opposite of everything I wanted to do. It's not about I want to find the best way to do something. I want to find my way of doing something. And
Wow.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess one of the biggest stories was I was going to work with another carpenter on a certain house idea. And then that went a little bit south, but I'd ordered all of the wood. And so it
Uh-huh.
went from this place of having an idea in mind that I was going to do with someone else to just having this
Mhm.
big pile of wood and no one to work with. And all of a sudden that was the colors, or that was the art studio. It was like all of a sudden my brain had actual material to start imagining and creating stuff with. And so
Yeah.
the cabin that I'm in now is an evolution of that. And the same with the kind of porch that I'm building, the little skylight that
Mhm.
it's got. And there's lots of stuff which, yeah, I had a friend come around the other day and he said, I was talking to him about some ideas that I had. And I wanted to break a big hole in the floor and create a kind of Japanese sitting area, this
Oh,
kind of thing. And it's super cool. And he looked at me and goes, I think you make your life too difficult, Nick. Like, that's why it's taking you so long. And he, and on one hand, he has a point. And I think one of the things is, yeah, the over ambitiousness of creativity, which is also part of something I was exploring in conversation yesterday with someone. Like, creativity is always in excess, it's always
yeah.
probably bigger than you can actually achieve.
Mhm.
Um,
That's the fun part though, because there's so much clay. Like this world has so much, and you always come back. I feel like whenever I have like a ton, one creative thing snowballs in. Like once you let go, it snowballs into like a ton of different ideas. And then I used to get stuck on like trying to harness all those ideas before they bleed because I knew I would get distracted on them. And I just decided like I let them go. They're gonna come back.
mhm.
Like something like some weird opportunity that I might have thought it was a setback, like that person not being able to help you, like ends up opening up a door for exactly like that thing that I didn't even know that I wanted or I wanted and I just hadn't done. But I love that. I love it that worked out that way for you. I think it's like a perfect example that like nothing can ever really go wrong. Like when we think about it, like it's just it's how we view it. Like everything is always pushing us forward towards something, and it's always creating, right? Like even people who think they're not creative, like they're creating
Yeah, all
so
the
much.
time, all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the nicest things about, it's definitely not necessary, but one thing that I've liked about learning this stuff, or kind of having this perspective and then approaching a creative project, like a kind of tangible thing, like, okay, I'm going to write a song, or I'm going to, produce this, or just use these techniques, is because it opens up, like, it gives you this kind of microcosm which you can actually study and see mistakes turning into opportunities, and this sort of thing, in ways that translates to living a creative life, which,
Mhm.
has nothing to do with the specific craft of writing or making something out of clay or building a house. It's just, how do you kind of adapt and embrace the moment unfolding in the billions different ways that that it does.
Yeah, like a little kid. Like I mean, I think that's like um it is. I love spending time with small children because and I love playing the what if game, like wouldn't it be cool, or the wouldn't it be cool if game with them, because they allow their creativity to just like there's no bar, no limit there with their creativity. Like they just kind of let everything go, and yeah, I fucking love being able to spend time with them in that aspect. And I think like what you're describing, kind of reminds me of when we allow ourselves to be children again. We just allow ourselves to not have the expect like you said, the expectation that it has to have any purpose or even that that it might mess things up for us. Like kids do stuff all the time that it
Yeah.
might backfire on them. They just whatever, they don't care. You get dirty, you can get clean. This gets broken, something always ends up leveling out. I think it's like that having that ability to just kind of trust that everything's just going to continue going, that kids do. Yeah, I love that about that aspect of being open with your creativity and allowing it to flow and letting it see all those other little things that branch out that might be good, might be bad, but
And
all will be
what's helped you
beneficial.
trust? What's helped you in that process of trusting yourself?
And what's really helped me is looking back and claiming every little thing that I thought was a mistake. Like instead of looking at the mistake, I look at actually like what ended up happening. Like what did it lead to? Like it led to something um like I had made was it? It was a demon. Like it wasn't supposed to be like a demon, right? But it had it I was gonna toss it. It was a mistake to me, but I kind of realized like I let other people see it. Like I kind of like I removed my expectation. Kind of like I let myself be upset with what I made instead of trying to be perfect with it. Like I kind of or get happy about it. Like I kind of let myself like throw a tantrum like a little kid about what I was doing. I didn't stay in it though. See, throw my tantrum and then oh, okay, like this here, I don't care anymore. Like, and then once I didn't care, that's part of it. Like that's been I feel like for me that because I identify so much because I try to remain, not try to remain so like because I have a natural inclination to look at things the way I did when I was little. Like I turned that back on to always look like I have a natural inclination to imagine and to pretend and to play in my mind. So and to be dramatic in that moment. I kind of burn bright and then boom, like I
Hmm.
don't, yeah, that whole, I allow myself to have that tantrum because, or with myself and then get over it. And that has helped me to release. Like, I think that trying to always process things in a way that people think is this is a positive way to handle it. But come on, sometimes you have to like, sometimes we have to scream, we have to make a noise, like we have to let that out and be silly. Like I often realize like if I get upset with a mistake that I made or something didn't work out the way, didn't come out the way I wanted, once I kind of like if I resist or try to force myself to accept what I did, instead of just realizing, no, and I didn't really like this. Like, no, I didn't like, and I kind of allow myself to go with it. And then until I'm done, and then I let it go. Like that's really helped with that process. Like just letting myself feel that I did this, letting myself indulge in that little this didn't work out. And then kind of moving on quickly because like I didn't avoid acknowledging that, yeah, I didn't like that. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
when you don't acknowledge it, that's when it ends up popping back. And that's a big part of it. Like I have my fit and I move on. I understand the temperamental artists now, like why
Yeah, yeah.
useful because they're just like, yeah, it's part of it. You have to let that passion flow in all areas. You just let it flow and don't block it and hold on to it.
Yeah, I love that. I love how much, I mean, there's so much self-acceptance and embracing it, like beyond just accepting it, but being willing to put it out there. I think that's what,
Yeah.
certain artists have done and shown us in society. And it's attractive. Like it's really is magnetic to see someone so willing to be on their own side in that way, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Um
I think there's people who I was telling my daughters and like there's the bad, like my grandma used to say that she always favored the naughty child, like, and I was like I think everyone kind of does, like they do get
yeah.
all the attention, they do get the attention because they're asking for it. And we have but I used to be the kid who didn't, like trying to be the society's idea. Like it was my natural inclination to be just as loud and rambunctious as every other kid. But when you tried to, please, or try to be not a problem or try to contribute, but when it came right down to it, at the end of the day, like being that kid who the kid in the family or the kid in any situation who is loud and who expresses themselves, they get the attention. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Like you have to let out all those parts of you. I mean, in order to to be to grow, and people identify with that. Like I think that's why we all love it, because that person is being themselves, and we really want to be ourselves. Like I say, unabashedly, unbridled, unfiltered yourself, not care what anybody thinks. And that's what makes people magnetic, because it may not be that they have traits we want to embody, but the fact that they do that, that's where the charisma lies. I mean,
Yeah.
there's lots of, you think of all the people that you're like, "Oh, I don't like that person, but I like that person," like the feeling,
Yeah,
you
for
just like
sure.
them because they're themselves.
Yeah.
Get that very countenance.
Yeah. So to get a sense of where you're at the moment, and maybe not right now, but like, so you're writing, you make stuff with clay, you do all sorts of stuff. And have you sold anything? Has that been a part of your creative journey to kind of,
Yeah,
sell stuff? Like, what do you do in that regard? Or
yeah.
have done?
I do sell stuff. It's funny actually too, because like I sell things, but it's never been my desire to like I've never looked at the selling of, I never tried to. When
Hmm.
I did try to sell things when I made them specifically to sell, nothing sold. But I didn't like what I'd made at that time too. I realized like I didn't want that. But I do, when I do create things, that a lot of what happens is I don't actually, anything that I try to make money doesn't work. It's usually someone will ask me, like,
Hmm.
can you can do this, can you make me this, or what would this look like? And then that's how like I'll get like a private commission on something, like on whatever it is, whether it be writing or like sculpting. I mean, it's, most people come to me, and where I will get money from is from people coming to me. Like I don't actually seek it out, or just coaching people. Most through spiritual like um, release, like mostly through not beating themselves up, kind of just like a friend, that you can talk to who doesn't really judge you. It's kind of been a thing that I've done all my life. Like I used to say that like I was, like as a child, like just since a child, people have just confessed their stuff to me. And I think a part of it is when I get one-on-one with someone, and I might, like you said, you embrace yourself, you let yourself be whoever you are, flaws and all, and people open up to that, and there's like a kindredness. So that's kind of how I attract my wealth. Like I used to think that you had to have a job, you had to work that. I was working like what, you know, but 60 hours a week, or traveling around, never see my kids. I worked, for different, big corporations, and worked for different companies, doing different things, and I just never happy, because it was never what I wanted to do. Like it was never, it was always trying. Like I said, I notice when I try and force my creativity, I just don't, I'm not successful. Like I might see financially, but I don't define success as monetary. Like I don't feel successful when I'm not feeling right. So that's the whole part of my of really embracing this creativity, and this way of thinking.
Mm.
And um that's how like I make my living, kind of like manifesting it through helping people. And but now it's funny, I actually feel I had to change how I, because things come to me, like I support myself through generating things, like things come to me, like I always receive money for different stuff. It's been jobs, but also, like I said, I can have a job, but it doesn't seem like I get, like I survive off those jobs. Like there's always, like I always find creativity is where it comes in, like whether it's talking to people about looking at their problem in a certain way, in a creative, like I said, like I told you, like I'll rewrite a story for
Hmm.
someone, and
Right.
that's like how I'll generate it. um and now like I'm getting back into this aspect because I feel drawn to it now. Like I actually felt like that was a big part of how I was making money, was talking to people. But now I feel like that at the point where I'm ready to make, like Before it was more like a communicative, like a more airy approach to work. But now I'm feeling the desire and the urge to move towards creating things that are tangible. So yeah, before it was more tangible, I mean intangible, and now I'm moving towards tangible things. And it's fun because it's a sensuous experience as opposed to a more spiritual experience, which is
Right, right.
exciting. Like I can create on a intangible level, but this is fun. Like I get to actually put my hands into clay and yeah, like I actually have a few projects that are coming up. I'm gonna be making some like memory style art dolls for people. So that's like I said before, I would help in an intangible way in communicating, and now I feel I feel the urge to move to help in a tangible way within my creativity. And I don't feel that reservation now, because the people who are coming to me know how my style is, like how they understand that, yes, it's not going to be like a cute little puppy. It's going to be whatever, I, however, whatever comes out of me, and
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
to create together. So yeah.
Yeah.
And how, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I love how, what I mean, just giving yourself permission and like having the awareness of your journey, so that at this stage when you create something, you're happy to show up as you are, and happy to acknowledge that the people who want you for, the type
yeah.
of art you create.
I
And
just figured it'll work itself out, like before I used to make things, or I would look for a job based upon if it was going to generate, like what was it going to give me what I needed. But now I have understood that, and since I've been practicing this approach, that everything always ends up lining up. Like instead of, that person, whatever I make, someone's going to end up wanting that. Like I don't have to, things are just going to line up.
mhm.
I don't have to try. And that was what I was saying, like the trying aspect was what was blocking me, and you can be successful. Like the other two, the definition, like defining my idea of what was successful, realizing it had nothing to do with what anybody else thought what success is. It has to do with what I define it as. And, for me, it's a sense of feeling, a sense of feeling like, I can create and not worry about what anybody thinks, and I can be uncensored and free.
Yeah. All right. I want to throw a little bit of a curveball in here, because on one hand, it's like, we've cracked the code. It can come across as like, oh, everything's working out perfectly now, which is obviously only part of the picture that we've been exploring. So like, what's one thing that, or a thing that feels like it is a current block, difficult to get to a project, or what kind of things are like challenging?
I think what was difficult lately was my was focus. Like I I can actually, like I can talk to anybody about anything and I can work through their problem, but it's the same thing. Like I often tell people, like if you have a problem that you bring to me, I'm experiencing the same thing and I'm getting feedback as I'm talking to you. One of the things though is that when you're someone who listens like you probably the same way, you overanalyze like yourself. So like I will overanalyze and overthink some things. And that's just something that, as being a human, I realize like that's part of life. Like remembering that I'm not always going to be positive. I'm not always going to do what I know I'm supposed to do. Like I always know instinctively what I should do, but I don't. There's lots of times I go against my intuition, and I do it because maybe I need a little drama. Maybe I need maybe there's a lesson that I know that I won't learn if I learn it just by
Mhm.
hearing people talk about it. That I know that sometimes they have to be tangible lessons. So um, I would say the getting out of the block is just remembering that I can move myself out of my way. That I that is just that's pretty much the consistent thing, is remembering that I can move myself out of my way. And once I get my own thoughts out of my way and I just start, you know, taking the action, like that's like whatever it is, like
Yeah.
once I remove that person and I start going, that's like that's what happens. But like, it's a lot of, getting caught up in that thing. So that's the block. Like the block has been, yeah, remembering that I don't have to overanalyze. It doesn't have to be perfect, and that I'm human. So I think that's just the continuous thing. Like I said, you're never going to get it right. You're never going to get it perfect, and it's never ending. And it's just remembering to forgive myself and not feel guilty about anything. That's the
Yeah,
but
brilliant.
I'm producing now. Like I said, it's a continuous thing. I don't know if you go through that, but I know that that's something that, like, I will experience blocks in productivity throughout the day if I allow myself to start thinking about, if I get into those old patterns. And it's just me kind of consistently reminding myself, like, oh, like becoming aware of it. And I mean, that's one of those things that, like I said, like I asked my kid, you have to find your own motivation, like, because your own self way of getting you going. And for me, I have to continuously just be conscious. Like it's the being wanting to go to sleep and not be conscious of what's going on around you. That's probably like the biggest block for me. But I think that's probably everyone's block. Like eventually we have it throughout the day. Like there's so many different things that distract you, right? So it's just reminding me, I remind myself of what I want, like, and how good
Hmm.
it's gonna not, to have it. And
Yeah. Yeah, I love that kind of, yeah, getting out of your own way, forgiveness and reminders. Like it's one of those things that I think there's nothing like it's a human reality that we forget stuff all the time. Like we know how to solve most of the problems that we're currently in all the time. We've been through them, we've survived, we've adapted, we've found loads of different ways to get to where we are right now.
yeah,
And so often it's just reminding ourselves of those past successes and reminding ourselves of what we currently want and whether we want to go around that same pattern again
yeah.
or create a new one.
Plus, there's Nick, there's so many different ways to get what we want without really us having a finger in it. Like there's many ways that people can like lose weight, or many people that things that can save a person's life that we may not think of it. Things are relative. So I feel like really whenever I start to beat myself up about not being productive, then I make a point to, like, like I said, just no, it's okay. Like I'm producing as I sit. I'm producing all sorts of stuff, like for food for all the many creatures that live on my body. You know what I mean? Like I just think of all the things that I'm actually doing constantly, and that I have no really, we all can do whatever we can, but we really have no clue how everything works out, how everything lines up for us. So it's kind of maybe just throwing my hands up and forgiving myself if I don't feel productive, like, oh well, and go do something, I just remind myself of all the ways that I am,
Yeah.
and embrace it. And then when I do feel productive, I'll be productive, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much power in that. One of the things that I work with is like this credit report, like giving yourself credit for the stuff that you've done. And there's also like additional question that you can throw in there. Like, what if you were to lower the bar so far that it would almost seem stupid to write it down? But I love this thing. It's like, I'm producing food for these little creatures that are all over my body. Like, that's amazing. But that is one of the ways that so much of what we do that we frame as procrastination, as like not getting to our work, as not doing anything, is actually rich in a whole diverse, a whole range of experiences, ponderings, musings that all count. You know what I mean? Like it all counts. The doing
yeah,
nothing is resting, and of course there's finding that balance. But I think that for so many of us, we're not even that analysis of how productive we're actually being is so far skewed to actually just be negative. Like we're just beating ourselves up and
right,
like masking it as like just being realistic about what we're actually achieving. I know that I never beat myself up as like, oh, you fucking piece of shit, you don't do anything. Like, yeah, now and again when it's really bad, but most of the time it's like, oh, did I really use this day? Probably not. Like
Yeah.
and even that is, I found it to be so counterproductive, rather than just being 100% on your own side and be like, hell yeah, I used this day. I just,
Mhm.
I just fed like all sorts of beings with my skin particles falling off. Like, you know what I mean? Like that counts. That's part of what being alive is. And, and it's almost that artistic delusion to allow yourself to be, allow yourself to go there. And if you
Yeah.
can be on your own side for simply just sitting around doing nothing, that
Mhm.
will help you be on your own side when it comes to publishing something that scares you. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because you don't
Work.
need validation. Yeah, exactly. Like all of that is built up in like, is how I'm showing up in the world enough to validate me to other people? And, can I be proud of myself in relation to the bigger context of what the work was going on in the world? And so
Yeah.
when you actually produce your piece of art and you're like, oh, can I share this? Can I show this? Those same
Mhm.
questions are going to be going through your mind. And you're like, oh, is this enough? Is this good enough? And you can freak yourself out to never actually sharing and contributing what you have to offer, partly
Mhm.
because you're not even allowing yourself to like contribute to your life by going like, yeah, nice one. I got out of bed in the morning, which can be
Yeah.
a real deal. Like that can be a real achievement when you're in like low places and whatever.
Yeah. Like really, we have to achieve like we have to look at everything. I actually I've told a few people and they told me like when you focus on something that you don't have, I often, like you said, look at the smallest little thing. Like and yeah, it's everywhere. Like you can find it everywhere, right? I mean, you find support in the chair that you're sitting on, and you find momentum in the wind in your car. You know what I mean? You find it in everything. Like you find it in your stomach. Like you're constantly just like evolving, and it's really cool. Like to see even even like you creating this. Like it's fun. Like we're just talking, but and who knows what will happen with it. But even in this little bit of interaction, like we're doing something. Like we're producing energy, we're expending energy, we're generating money for people. Like
Yeah, yeah,
so
right.
right. I mean, we're making smog. We're doing all sorts of stuff for constantly. So I just yeah, it's just constantly realizing that we're always producing, we're always working. So what we're really here to do is just imagine and create and play.
Yeah,
And
and I think it gives you so much more to work with. Like I love the way you say it, because again, it's building that awareness. And when you're just aware, or the only thing you're focusing on is the nothingness, like one, it's a lie and it doesn't give you anything to work with. And so there's nothing wrong with being like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to produce as much smog or all these sort of things, but they're
yeah,
happening and there's energy that's creating them. So it gives you actually something to redirect and recognize that you are actually already in motion.
yeah,
And then you can change the way you want to go.
whatever does works for you, like whatever that's why I said, like, what if you feel inspired to do it and you don't feel like a resistance, then yeah, that's where you're meant to go to create, right? That's where you're meant to flow and into it.
Yeah, cool. All right, I'm feeling like this is kind of, wrapping up at a nice point. But is there any final thoughts you want to go into, or questions, or want to share with anyone where you're going creatively currently?
It's funny. I actually have had a plan up until this point, and I was actually telling someone that the other day. I was like, I have had everything planned up until like February, and this is the first time I had some, not just planned, but I wouldn't call it planned, but I had a vision and a sight of where I wanted to be. Like I had a clear goal, and now I'm at the point where all those things that I had wanted, they're coming to fruition. And like I had said with you, like let's just see what happens. I'm actually at that point where I'm kind of I'm settling down to the initial resistance of I don't have a plan. Like I know what I know my eventuality, like I know the goal. I don't have the plan in place. Like I have left it open to before I would be really rigid. So I've left my plan very open, and it's exciting because I'm doing things that I know I want to do without the internal freaking out planning. So Yeah, I'm excited. I know it's something big. It does have, I won't go there. There's a goal that I have, but like I said, I'm allowing it to happen, and I'm through communicating, like through this type of communication. Like I'm not actually making the efforts. I'm allowing my creativity to pull it to me. And this is just like a little experiment that I'm doing, and I'm planning on doing it from April until the end of the year, of just allowing stuff to line up by not holding myself back, like going with my initial impulse, as long as it lines up with what my desired outcome is. So not in the sense that like I can see it working out that way, but it vibes right with where I want to be.
Right,
So
right.
yeah,
Cool.
it's something for me who is kind of a control freak, like I said, with the kids, having that, like, this is interesting. Usually I've had everything kind of planned out and journaled, or yeah, multiple like weekly planners, phone, all that. And this is the first time where I'm gonna allow this to just be chaotic and do for myself what I tell everyone else to do. I'm gonna practice what I preach.
Yeah, nice, nice. Cool. Well, maybe I'll check in with you in a year's time or something.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Nick.
But cool.
It was
Yeah, this has been really nice. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've loved all the places that it's flowed, and how kind of effortlessly the conversation itself touched on and kind of confirmed so many things that I'm kind of working with and have been learning. And so yeah, it's been a real gift. Thank you so much, Moxie.
Thank you, Nick.